is this not really depressing that it's taken an American magazine to break this story? Because do not tell me that journalists in Westminster did not know about this.
Yes, I think that's probably true. And I'm afraid to say that there is a real sort of sense of fear around that. You've seen stories be taken offline, Dan, that speak out about Carrie Johnson if she doesn't like them. It's an extraordinary state of affairs because it does start to look like everything that you've just set out. Whilst, yes, the rules might not have been broken, there might not have been a technical breach, but as you say, the spirit of those rules, they start to look like they've been bent, where it's a case of rules for thee, but not for me. And it doesn't sit right. I think it's sort of King Bozza and Carrie Antoinette here deciding that it's quite all right for the rest of the country to endure being deprived of their nearest and dearest. You said yourself, Dan, that you couldn't see your partner at Christmas. I was the same. It was a case of where you sat around your turkey that year, not knowing if you're going to be able to see your family and all the rest of it. And of course we weren't. We were stripped, denied that right. And if you remember, at that time, London was in tier 4. Remember the fact we had all these silly tiers, which meant that Christmas bubbles were scrapped. So it was a depressing old beast, Christmas, for everyone. And you have this sort of bizarre spectacle where you've got Her Majesty's Trade Secretary on the airwaves this morning defending Miss Ali and taking care of Wilfred. You know, that was the way in which they're excusing it. But I dare say, Dan, do you not find it a bit odd for Carrie and Boris to have been working on Christmas Day? Were they really at work on Christmas Day? As you say, it suggests that the spirit of those rules are differently applied to the PM. That's what I'm worried about.
Well, exactly. And also, Darren, there's another intriguing factor in all of this, which is that it was reported, I think, around January the 9th, but tell me if I'm wrong, it was reported around that time, again, I think by the Daily Telegraph, that Carrie Johnson's mother had formed a bubble with Downing Street too. So that means they had one bubble running for Christmas, another bubble running for January.
Exactly. So being in a support bubble with Carrie Johnson's mother as well, it starts to all look a little bit too convenient, doesn't it, Dan? That's the concern here. And I mean, you rewind back to April, and we were discussing the fact, weren't we, that Carrie Johnson had reportedly spent, according to the tabloids, somewhere around the 200 grand mark on doing up the Downing Street flat because Boris was too afraid to let Mrs. Johnson know that it was all getting a little bit too expensive, reportedly. But for a sort of princely taxpayer-funded salary of 157,000, Boris Johnson found himself having to ask donors to plug the gaps. I mean, it was an extraordinary affair. And you sort of think the world was sort of falling apart, these people at that time, because of the rules, the restrictions that Boris Johnson's government had put in place, let's not forget. So it just looks like the priorities are all wrong. And I tell you what, Dan, it's odd for me just how far from being this sort of British lion determined to have us hear the roar of not just him, but the country as well. Boris seems to now be a sort of woke, timid tabby cat, and you sort of get the sense that his relationship with Carrie Johnson has been at the very heart of that transition. Now, we hear a lot about building back better from this Prime Minister of ours, but I tell you what, Dan, I tell you what I want. I want to know how to build Boris back better, because I preferred the old version, the one where you wouldn't have cowed the question, you know, shied away from that question from GBNews about who owns a cervix. One that, far from levelling up, I actually think risks, you know, he talks about the sort of emancipation of the red wall, unshackling the red wall and levelling up there. Boris Johnson's whackery and wokery and the focus on the green folkery, I think, risks immiserating his new voters in areas like this one here in County Durham. And, you know, it was only in 2019, Dan, that Boris was arguing that Extinction Rebellion and groups like them should get themselves out of Beijing instead of, you know, fannying around on the M25 as they were, or are indeed. And all of these things have changed in sort of breakneck speed, where he's championing a programme of building back better in a more gender-neutral and more feminine way. Boris Johnson's turned into Justin Trudeau, Dan. It's bizarre.
Well, that's certainly, I guess, the central thesis of this Harper's Bazaar article, isn't it? That Carrie has influenced him and he's gone woke. That's I think, a fair point. When it comes to the COVID regulations, Darren, I just want to be clear. I don't give a damn who Boris Johnson was hanging out with on Christmas Day. It does not bother me. And it would not be something that we were even discussing if he hadn't put all of us through that absolute hell at Christmas. Surely the Prime Minister now has to realise it's time to trust the British public to make sensible decisions about who they spend time with, about what regulations they need to follow. And I say this, Darren, because, of course, we're coming up to Christmas time again. COVID cases are on the rise. Sage are agitating for another lockdown. We have Neil Ferguson, that failed professor, again today saying we need to come back and do something more stringent when it comes to the regulations. So this is why it just all needs to stop. Darren, just finally, though, I will just tell you, I know you mentioned the International Trade Secretary, Anne-Marie Trevelyan. This is what she actually had to say to justify what the Prime Minister did. It's hard enough for the rest of us when you're having to run a country as well and have the challenges of difficult pregnancies. Having a supportive friend to be there in your bubble is absolutely the right thing to do. So the government's standing by the decision. Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.